welcome to the American Academy of Actuaries webinar, New Membership Requirements. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kathy Murphy-Barron, the chairperson of the Committee on Membership, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few tools on your screen that you can use to maximize your viewing and engagement experience. The individual windows are resizable and movable, so please feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand the slide area and the media player by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner of these windows. If you have questions, please enter them in the Ask a Question box, and we will try to answer all of your questions towards the end of today's presentation. The slides from today's webinar are available in the Slides and Resources section. And for answers to some common technical issues, please click the Help button at the bottom of your screen. We invite you to share your feedback on today's webinar by clicking on the Take the Survey tool, which you will see on your screen also. Please note, the presenter's statements and opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the official statements or opinions of the ABCD or the ASB. Any boards or committees of the American Academy of Actuaries or any other actuarial organizations, nor do they express the opinions of the presenter's employers. So let's get started. Here's a quick rundown of what we'll cover today. We'll start by telling a little bit about the Academy, then we'll describe the new membership requirements and give an overview of the competency framework. And we'll close then by addressing some of your questions. So who are we? I'm Kathy Murphy-Barron. I am chairperson of the Committee on Membership. And with me today is Tim Geddes, co-chair of the Membership Requirements Subcommittee. Nancy Behrens, vice president of the Council on Professionalism and Education, was also to present today, but unfortunately she is ill and can't join us, so I will attempt to do her part of the presentation. But I do want to acknowledge her effort and hard work on this initiative. So we're going to take a minute to revisit the roots and purpose of the American Academy of Actuaries. It was founded in 1965 as the U.S. National Actuarial Association. Our Academy has grown from about 1,400 charter members to over 20,000 members today. As a member, you're part of a community of professionals with diverse backgrounds and expertise, including actuaries, consultants, corporate executives, regulators, professors, government officials, and retirees. Together, we encompass various areas of practice. You expect retirement, life, property and casualty, health, but also financial reporting, risk management, and many others. Webinars like today's are part of the Academy's service mission to the public and the U.S. actuarial profession. The Academy is dedicated to informing the public about the role and value of actuarial work, delivering value to members through resources and opportunities for growth, assisting policymakers informing sound public policy, and setting professional standards for U.S. actuaries. As we go through today's webinar, remember that the Academy values the experience and knowledge each member brings, and our goals align with your aspirations as members, and we are committed to supporting you in advancing the actuarial profession and upholding its integrity. So as we start down this path, I wanted to remind you of the Academy's mission and vision statements, which guide our collective efforts as members and professional. The Academy's mission is to serve the public and the U.S. actuarial profession by providing the public policy voice of the U.S. actuarial profession on state, federal, and international issues, and establishing the framework for professionalism related to qualification and practice. And the vision of the Academy is a future where the financial security system in the U.S. is sound and sustainable, and actuaries are recognized as preeminent experts in risk and financial security. So notice that everything we are and we do is focused on the U.S. and the actuarial profession in the U.S. So with those guiding principles in mind, let's talk about the new membership requirements. Tim, would you like to explain what those are?
So why did the Academy update its membership requirements? I mean, I'll start in the middle of this page to note that the Academy regularly reviews its membership requirements to make sure that we are meeting our stakeholder requirements. And what do we mean by our stakeholder requirements? First and foremost, the Academy is the national association for the U.S. actuarial profession. And so the public in the United States, the stakeholders of actuarial work in the United States are our key target stakeholders. Beyond that, we recognize that the MAA designation is included in more than 1,000 state and federal regulations. That was another project that the Academy Board undertook, was to get an understanding of how often do regulators and lawmakers make reference to the Academy designation? And the answer is very frequently. So with that responsibility in mind, again, it's very important that we have a set of membership requirements that are aligned with the expectations of what we think it is necessary in order to provide that service to the U.S. stakeholders for actuarial work. As a part of the most recent review of the membership requirements, the Academy Board approved in 2023 a competency framework. The competency framework is somewhat similar to a syllabus for exams. It's a list of the key areas of experience and education that we would expect actuaries seeking to join the Academy would have. And then the goal of the competency framework is to reflect the independence of the Academy as an independent institution, and to be able to, on our own, set what we think the standards are for joining the Academy. So what are the new membership requirements? They're divided into two major categories. The first is basic education and overall education. And within that, there's two prongs. The first is the ability to state that you have satisfied the competency framework, which includes, a baseline set of categories of actuarial competency. The second is that, again, the Academy does not have credentialing exams of its own. We rely on and believe that the actuarial credentialing process is an important part of our profession. So in addition to being able to say and demonstrate that you have met the competency requirements, the Academy also will continue to require the achievement of an actuarial credential from a credentialing organization recognized by the Academy, for example, the CAS or the SOA. And then the second category of membership requirements is experience, responsible actuarial experience. And we're going to give more detail on each of these areas, but the Academy believes that not only is it important that you have the core skills developed through basic education, but also that you have the practical ability and the experience working with other actuaries in order to be able to make use of those skills for our stakeholders. So just to tee up the competency framework, it's important that, and there are links at the back of this presentation, I encourage everybody to familiarize yourself with what is in the competency framework. But it's important to recognize that there are 14 competencies, but within those competencies, there are different levels of knowledge that might be expected of someone seeking to join the Academy. The two most commonly used standards are basic familiarity, which means that you've been exposed to the topic, you have some knowledge of the topic. I've taken to saying that you know more about that topic than the average educated person, but you may not necessarily have extremely detailed knowledge about that particular topic. The other level of knowledge that's referred to in the competency framework is foundational knowledge. Foundational knowledge means you are very aware of that topic and you are able to apply that topic in your daily work with the specific type of work that you're doing. And that's a good segue to the second piece that I wanted to highlight, is that in some cases, the competency framework requires a broad knowledge. The example I'll give is I think it's competency one, which is probability and statistics. I think everybody on this call would likely agree that having a really good knowledge of probability and statistics is pretty much fundamental to being an actuary. But there are other areas where the knowledge that's expected from the competency framework is within your specific area of actuarial practice. And again, just to highlight that specific area of actuarial practice is taken to be at a level, even more granular than our traditional, 4 or 5 areas of actuarial practice. This is specific to the actual work that you do. So you'll see references frequently within the competency framework to knowledge within a specific area of actuarial practice. The example here that I gave was the actuary's role in product design, which might vary greatly between something on the life side, something on the health side, something on the casualty side. You're not expected to understand the actuary's role in a casualty product if you are a health actuary, right? So, and that's the kind of detail that is sought in the competency framework. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Kathy to walk through a little bit more detail on what is in the competency framework.
Okay, so I think it's helpful to remember why the Committee on Membership and the board felt it was important to have a competency framework. When any one of us is speaking to regulators, employers, or the public, we want to be able to say what it means to be a member of the American Academy of Actuaries and what does that person know and how do they act. So the competency framework gives us the framework to actually show that. It's divided into 3 major topics: general actuarial topics, US laws and regulations, and US professionalism. On the general actuarial topics section, for most people who've achieved associateship in the Casualty Actuarial Society or the Society of Actuaries, the vast majority of these topics will have been covered through the exam process. As the competency framework was being developed, we worked with both the CAS and the SOA to determine how their current associateship syllabi covered this portion of the competency framework. But we recognize that these syllabi will continually be changing as over time. So an application will have to consider each of these topics listed in the framework and what they learned while earning their designation to make sure that they've covered all of the topics that are in here. Now, you don't have to do it alone. Additional detail will be available from the Academy through learning objectives for each competency, but that's the idea behind the general actuarial topics. The second is the US specific laws and regulations. For most applications, there will be some work to do here to demonstrate that you've achieved the level of knowledge, be it basic understanding or foundational knowledge, for the laws and regulations that apply to your specific area. So you first identify what laws and regulations apply to your specific area, then you need to determine if you've achieved the required level through exams or experience. And then the final is the US actuarial professionalism. So let's look at the various components of the general actuarial topic section of the competency framework. There are 12. Members should have a solid grasp of probability and statistics, along with additional relevant techniques for your specific area of practice. It's also essential, not surprisingly, to understand the primary actuarial models used in your area. And we're also looking for basic understanding and familiarity of the principles of data management and analysis, risk classification, and investments and portfolio management. And also a strong foundation in macro and microeconomic principles is also very important for we believe, for our members. The other are obvious items that are specific to your practice and you would expect in a competency framework for actuaries. An understanding of the principles of reserving for contingent liabilities and to be knowledgeable about the liability types and reserve models relevant for your practice area. I don't think any of us is surprised that that's in here, considering how hard it is to pass those exams. Also, a general understanding of benefit programs and products in your area, as well as the actuary's role in product design. And also, we think a solid understanding of premium development and rate-making principles is essential, and the members should be familiar with data sources and models used in your specific area. And then, of course, you need to be familiar with risk management principles, primary enterprise risks, and also techniques in your area of practice, and also understanding the actuary's role in risk management. As we said, the competency framework is designed to ensure that the members are knowledgeable, well-rounded professionals in their respective areas of practice. And by focusing on these core competencies, we can continue to uphold the high standards of excellence within the actuarial profession. The second major component of the framework is US-specific topics. And there are 3 items in this section. We want members to have basic familiarity with US financial systems, such as banking and Federal Reserve, and a foundational knowledge of the specific systems relevant to your area of practice, and including social insurance systems. You also need a basic understanding of US accounting principles, along with, again, a foundational knowledge for your specific, of the specific rules affecting actuarial work in your area of practice. So obviously GAAP and tax and statutory financial accounting are important and specifically related to the actuarial aspect of those. And then members must have a basic familiarity with US laws and regulations. That's contracts, taxation, insurance law, but a foundational knowledge of those laws and regulations governing actuarial practice in your area. Those would be specifically related to data management and security, risk classification, and premium development. And the final component of the comp framework relates to ethics and professionalism. Members must have a foundational knowledge of actuarial professionalism principles, as well as US professionalism infrastructure, such as the Code of Conduct, the US qualification standards, disciplinary process, and relevant actuarial standards of practice. So satisfying the competency framework. We expect the prospective member to satisfy the competency framework one of three ways, or all 3 ways. The first is the examination process that you had to take to achieve your actuarial credential. As we talked about in the general actuarial topics, we expect most of the general actuarial topics to be addressed via the examination process for your associateship. Any topics that aren't covered by the credential process could be addressed by additional learning, which could be offered by the Academy or could be gotten through some other source. And then finally, during using experience. During the course of your actuarial work experience and other experience, you may be able to demonstrate competency for some of the other topics. This would likely be the case for US laws and regulations, perhaps, but some of the other topics as well. But these 3 options are designed to provide the flexibility that it will ensure the highest level of professionalism and expertise within the actuarial field, allowing you to cover and gain the competency through all aspects of the framework, and through without having to do a lot more than you're currently doing. And I will hand it off to Tim to talk about the other requirements beyond the competency framework.
Thanks, Kathy. Hopefully this continues to work and you all can hear me. So as I mentioned when we teed this whole thing up, there was a significant amount of discussion about if we have the competency framework, does that supplant the requirement for an actuarial credential? And the near universal view of the board at that time was, no, we think that the process of achieving actuarial credentials, which almost always involves a rigorous examination process, continues to be a vital part of our profession and continues to be an important thing about what makes an actuary an actuary. And as a result, within the membership requirements, we require both the ability to attest to achieving the competencies within the competency framework, as well as having a credential from a recognized, we'll call it a recognized actuarial organization. The list does not exclusively include the US organizations. There certainly are other organizations that we regularly receive applications from, but it certainly does include the SOA, the CAS. We have every intention of continuing to accept folks who have passed the enrollment exams issued by the Joint Board for the Enrollment of Actuaries. As another example, again, that is a recognized actuarial credential. The main message on this one is it's not a specific credential that is required. And maybe I should also reiterate that the Academy has a long-standing history of accepting actuaries at the associate or fellowship level from recognized organizations. And again, we would expect that history to continue. But the key is not that there is a specific credential we're looking for, but that you both can state that you satisfy the competency framework and have achieved a credential from a recognized actuarial organization. And then the next slide is responsible actuarial experience. I'll start again, maybe a little out of order, and start at the bottom. So what does responsible actuarial experience mean? Borrowing the definition from the USQS, responsible actuarial experience is defined as work that demands knowledge and skill in solving actuarial problems. So people working in a capacity where they are doing actuarial type work over a period of time qualifies as responsible actuarial experience. And the specifics of this experience requirement are that applicants would be expected to have 3 years of relevant actuarial experience, at least one of those years focused on U.S. actuarial practice. And that second part is really solidifying the requirement for people who perhaps have just started working on U.S. related matters. We want some objective criteria in evaluating those applications. As the U.S. Actuarial Organization, we want anyone working on U.S. actuarial work to become members of the Academy. And this is just a way of making sure that the people who are joining have reason and have the experience in working on U.S. matters before they represent themselves as members of the U.S. Actuarial Organization. And then I'm passing it back to you, Kathy, to talk a little bit about effective date. And I hope that will answer some of the questions that I see in the Q&A.
Oh, sorry, I moved forward. The effective date for the new membership requirements are January 1, 2026. One thing to remember, the new requirements apply to new members and to former members seeking reinstatement only. So new members or former members. The current members do not have to do anything additional to maintain their membership within the Academy. By being part of the Academy, you not only support our mission to support the public and the U.S. actuarial profession, but you also gain access to valuable resources that enable you to become a more informed actuary. So while we have your attention, we want to emphasize the abundant opportunities available to you for professional growth and skill development. The Academy provides a wide range of resources designed to enhance your actuarial journey, including high quality and low cost continuing education opportunities, such as free access to a library of recorded professionalism webinars and presentations through Academy Learning. And the MAAA credential signifies your commitment to the highest standards of actuarial practice and professionalism. Membership in the Academy offers several additional benefits. It allows you to stay informed and engaged, to keep up with the latest trends, reports, and best practices through the Academy publications, and giving you access to industry insights and research. Allows you to connect with a community of over 20,000 experienced and accomplished peers across all practice areas, fostering collaboration and growth within the profession, and enhancing your leadership skills by participating in various Academy committees or short-term volunteer opportunities, allowing you to contribute to the profession and the public good while developing your abilities as a leader. And as a long-time volunteer in the Academy, I highly recommend the volunteering aspect of that statement. So we have a special offer. Given the new changes to the membership requirements, the Academy is offering a special promotion. For qualifying non-members who wish to enroll, we will waive the $75 application fee for new members. And if you are a former Academy member considering rejoining the Academy, we're waiving all back dues for those who rejoined before 2026. You just submit the reinstatement application, and then you just pay the current year's membership dues. So we would like to encourage current members listening today also to share this information with people you know, actuaries you know, including actuaries at the beginning of their careers or those who may have resigned for whatever reason in the past. We greatly value your support in spreading the word about the Academy, our new membership requirements, and this limited time offer. And we're now ready to move on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you've not already done so, we encourage you to enter your questions into the Ask the Question box, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions. And while you're doing that, I'll point out that we've included some links here on this slide to get more details about what we have discussed today with regard to the competency framework and the membership requirements. And I have not looked at any of the questions yet. So.
Well, I can, maybe Kathy, I can go after a couple that I looked at while you were just presenting the last slide. Okay. First, I noticed there were a couple who said the slides were not advancing. I didn't see a deluge of those, so I apologize to the people for whom they were not advancing, but assume that was a somewhat isolated situation. There was a question early on about needing to prove that you have specific knowledge for current responsibilities, but what if your responsibilities change and you move over to another area? I think the answer to that is, our focus is that we want people to join the Academy if they have a specific area of actuarial work and they are performing that work and have the requisite experience to perform that work. If they subsequently move over to another area, that doesn't really affect their membership, but maybe this is a good time to point out that membership in the Academy and qualification to issue a statement of actuarial opinion under the U.S. qualification standards, the USQS, are different things. And it is certainly possible to be able to be a member of the Academy, but not be qualified to issue a given statement of actuarial opinion. I would be grossly unqualified to issue a life actuarial statement of actuarial opinion because I'm a pension actuary. And so it's really important to distinguish between the membership requirements that we just laid out, which are what we require of people who seek to join the Academy, as compared to the USQS requirements that include things like continuing education, that include specific focus areas, and that have two levels, this general requirements as well as specific requirements for specific actuarial opinions. Those are very different things. And hopefully maybe that helps answer that question. I don't know, Kathy, if that allowed you to come up with another question to ask.
So the one, that one answers, yeah, that's a good answer. I see one who says, does working as a student actuary while I pass exams to become an ASA count towards the 3 years of experience?
The answer to that is definitely yes, as long as it is responsible actuarial experience, right? So as long as you are doing actuarial type calculations and actuarial work, that is envisaged as being responsible actuarial experience. Again, a lot of these things are look in the mirror tests, but it is not intended that you have 3 years as a credentialed actuary. That is not the requirement. The requirement is 3 years of responsible actuarial experience. And I would expect that most student actuaries are engaged in responsible actuarial work while they are pursuing their exams, because that's generally the type of work that is asked of student actuaries.
Yes. I think, yes, I've got another question. It's basically the same question. How do you show? So how do we show we satisfied the competency framework during the application process to become an MAAA? Is it an attestation stating compliance? Do we need to submit transcripts from the SOA and any other organization that shows competency of framework items?
Yeah, so we, as the membership requirements subcommittee and the membership committee, are working on updating the application process. It will likely include some form of self-certification as to how you believe you satisfy the competency framework based on probably the three categories that Kathy had on her slide, right? Examinations, other educational opportunities, or work, or I should say experience in general. Yeah. There, again, much of this is look at the beer self-certification, but also the Academy, both this Committee on Education as well as the Membership Requirements Subcommittee, have done a decent amount of work at looking at recent syllabi from the U.S. organizations and have a pretty decent understanding of what material within the competency framework is clearly covered on associate exams, what material is covered on fellowship exams that's beyond the associate level, and what information, if any, is potentially just not covered on the examination process. And so we have a pretty decent understanding of where we would expect you to be able to demonstrate that you've done that through exams.
Okay. This is one that you may know the answer to, Tim. Okay, so moving. How do the Academy's responsible actuarial work differ from what the EAs need to obtain that credential?
Yeah, I don't have it's funny. I went back and read that because I just signed off on someone's enrolled actuary submission. I don't have a detailed cross sort of look at that. What I will say is that the enrollment requirements are very detailed in the things that you have to do, right? So you must, for example, have been involved in experience studies. You must be involved in calculating funding obligations. These requirements, this sense of responsible actuarial experience, is not specific to the breadth of things you have done, but rather, requiring you to have done actuarial work. But I would expect that what is intended here, the level of experience that's being asked of someone, is very similar to what I recall the joint board regulations saying is being asked of enrolled actuaries.
The other one is why did we add an explicit experience requirement? Although some people think that we had one already based on the questions.
Yeah, so the Academy did for a long time have a 3-year experience requirement. That experience requirement was taken out when the USQS was introduced, I believe. And the logic was at that time was that the USQS has a very specific set of educational requirements and experience requirements, and that potentially rendered the membership requirements redundant to have an experience requirement. I don't know that that's inaccurate. That's not wrong, but there was a discussion had about whether it made sense to reinstate the experience requirement. And in light of the focus on being the U.S. actuarial organization, it seemed that some level of experience should be asked related to U.S. matters. And with that being introduced, it also reopened the discussion around, well, should there also be a broader experience requirement? And the general sense was that, that likely did in fact make sense. Again, our stakeholders would expect not simply that a member of the Academy has book experience, if you will, trying to not be pejorative in that sense, but just our stakeholders expect that we have both the requisite underpinnings as well as the practical experience that usually comes from doing the work. And so it was decided that it probably made sense to not just add a U.S. experience requirement, but to also add a general experience requirement as well.
There's a few questions in here with regard to how does the new, have a compare and contrast new versus old and what the difference is. So we might have to take that back and sort of put together something at a high level and post it on the page as to what the differences are.
If I can, Kathy, when I saw that question, I did go back and just look at just to make sure I remembered, what are the current requirements? And what I would say is that there's two principal changes. The first change, well, maybe there's more than two, so I shouldn't constrain myself. But the first change is the old requirements around basic education are very credential based. So it is basically assumed that you will get the knowledge that you have if you are ASA. And while that is almost always true, that doesn't necessarily reflect the independence of the academy, in that its membership requirements would automatically change if the Society of Actuaries decided to change what it covers on its exams. And so there was a desire to, break that one-to-one link between achieving a credential and being able to be a member. So that was one thing. The other two things that are different is that there was a decent amount of subjectivity in things like be of good moral character, which is, I think, part of the current requirements. And then the third thing is just that for non-US applicants, the current requirements distinguish between non-residents or recent residents. And it seemed to us that residency is not directly related necessarily to the experience that we were looking for. And we thought it made more sense to lay out what we think the experience should be, rather than what's in the existing requirements is almost an inference that if you are living in the US, you probably have been doing US work, and so you probably have this knowledge. And that may or may not be true. And so we wanted to be much more sort of concrete in the idea that it doesn't really matter where you live. If you live in Toronto, but all you've been doing for the past 10 years is working on US statutory accounting, then you have the requisite experience that we are looking for, regardless of where you live. And we wanted to clean that up a bit.
This one is, I don't know that we can answer this one, but it relates to, do you have to maintain a credential besides achieving it? What if you let your joint board enrollment lapse because you're now retired, no longer performing actuarial services? If you apply for academy membership, are you considered as having satisfied the credential requirements?
So I think I can answer that, because that was going to be my number 4, which is if you look at the most recent revision to the USQS, there was an intentional effort in the revision to the USQS to take out a requirement to, maintain the credential that you originally achieved your basic education from, and simply to require that you have achieved that level. And I believe the intent with the membership requirements is to similarly say you have to have achieved that credential in order to join the academy, but you do not necessarily have to be maintaining that credential in order to join the academy. But I will reiterate again that that is a different requirement than the USQS. So make sure that if you are going to issue statements of actuarial opinion, that you also feel comfortable that you satisfy the USQS for the particular statement of actuarial opinion that you are issuing.
So this question, I think, is just a clarification on what we mean by experience. It's like, are 3 years of actuarial experience included while still in college, or only work experience? And it's just,
I think the intent is work experience.
Work experience is actuarial work experience. Just because you're studying in college doesn't satisfy the 3 years.
Yes. I think being in college classes is viewed as part of basic education. And I think that the experience is intended to be working in the actuarial field.
Again, just to reiterate, and you said this already, there's a difference between the USQS and statements of actuarial opinion and the academy membership requirements. And so there's a lot of confusion about that. So there's a couple of questions here related to the USQS, and that's different and standalone from the academy membership requirements. Just wanted to point that out to everybody. I think most of the other questions in here have been addressed. The one thing I would like to share with everyone is that We are developing the new application process, as Tim said, with regard to this. So there's a current process if you want to enroll as of in 2025, and then there's an application process for 2026, which we are developing. For those of you who are submitting an application this year and you would be willing to volunteer to beta test our new application requirements, it doesn't affect whether you'd be approved or not, because 2025 you're approved under the 2025 requirements. But if you'd be willing to be a beta tester, we'd love to have you volunteer. So if you would contact us or let us know when you're applying that you'd be willing to beta test the new requirements, we would love to have you do that. And if you do beta test, we give you a $50 gift certificate. So come and help us. So not a quest for a comparative chart if you would to show the coming, current, and pre-USQS requirements side by side. Again, we're talking academy requirements pre and post, and USQS is different. It covers a broad range of actions. Do you see any other ones we haven't addressed in here, Tim? I think.
I see one that I don't completely know the answer to, but I want to acknowledge the question, which is a question of that they believe you need another actuary to review and recommend that you may join. Will that still be the case? I know the intention is to continue to request a reference on the application. And again, we are still beta testing the new application. That is not, it's not an explicit membership requirement, but it is part of the application process, and I would expect it to remain so.
Yeah. I think we've managed to address everything else that's in here. We already talked about those living elsewhere. And we've talked about internship, part-time work and internship as all counting towards the experience requirements. So we've talked about that.
Yeah, I do want to underscore that because we did talk about college, which I think does not meet what we intend in the idea of responsible actuarial experience. But if you are working as an intern, and as an intern you are doing the same thing that you would be doing if you were in your first year after graduating college, I think that probably is responsible actuarial experience. If you are working as an intern and your job is to take numbers off of valuation reports and put them on 5500s, I am not sure that is responsible actuarial experience. Again, I think the key is look in the mirror and ask yourself, read the definition of responsible actuarial experience and ask yourself whether you think the work you have been doing meets that requirement.
Okay, and just to reiterate in response to a question that just popped up, this does not impact existing members of the Academy. This is for new members, people who are not currently members of the Academy, and also people who are not members of the Academy because they previously were and they let it lapse or resign for some reason and they would like to rejoin the Academy. So if you're an existing member, it does not apply to you. We want to make sure you understand because presumably you interact with people that you work with who are not members or people who are entering the actuarial profession, and we want to make sure that you understand the requirements so that you can educate others who are not currently members about what's changing. So thank you for that. I think that's everything. Thank you for all of these great questions. I don't see any others. I don't. Give it a minute. Okay. I think then, as there aren't any others coming in, the flow seems to have stopped. I would like to thank Jim for joining me today, particularly given that Nancy couldn't join. I want to make sure thank Nancy for all of her work in putting together the slides as well for today. And behalf of all of us at the Academy, thank you all of you who joined the webinar today for your participation and for the great questions. For additional information or questions, please contact us at the email shown on this slide. And also, if you like to beta test, you can also contact that email address. The slides and a recording of today's webinar will be available on demand to Academy members on your member profile within the next 3 business days. And to learn about and register for upcoming Academy webinars and educational programs, please visit the Academy calendar events at www.actuary.org. Thank you again for joining us and have a great day.